There are moments in life that silence you not because you have nothing to say, but because the pain speaks louder than words ever could. You gave everything, your loyalty, your time, your truth, and in return they left. Not slowly, not with explanation, but with a coldness that makes you question whether they ever valued you at all. You stood there, heart torn, holding memories like shattered glass bleeding, but still unwilling to let go. The tears that followed weren't just sadness, they were the soul's way of grieving the death of something it thought was real. But here's the truth they never expected: the person they left in tears didn't stay there. You didn't stay broken, you didn't stay silent. Time didn't just pass, it transformed you. And while they laughed, moved on, and ignored the damage they caused, life was quietly preparing its lesson. Because no one escapes the weight of what they've done, not forever. Now the very silence they gave you returns to them tenfold, but louder, heavier, and unrelenting. This is not just your story of pain, it is your story of becoming. And now the tears are no longer yours to shed. The injustice of abandonment leaves deep psychological scars. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't just end a relationship, it reshapes your entire view of human connection. Being left, not because of something you did, but because someone chose to walk away when they knew you were invested, leaves behind more than just confusion. It creates a silence that echoes for years. That kind of abandonment doesn't knock the air out of your lungs once, it does so repeatedly. Every time you remember how little your presence seemed to matter to them. When someone who once looked you in the eyes with warmth now pretends like you never existed, it disrupts more than your emotions. It destabilizes your trust in the world. You begin questioning whether love is real, whether kindness is always a setup for disappointment. Your mind replays every conversation, trying to identify where things went wrong, but often you won't find answers. Because sometimes the reason people leave has nothing to do with your flaws and everything to do with their inability to appreciate something genuine. What hurts most isn't even the goodbye, it's the way it was delivered. Cold, detached, as if you were suddenly a burden, as if the memories meant nothing. This form of emotional abandonment is devastating precisely because it violates the unspoken contract of care. When we form bonds with others, there's an understanding, even if unstated, that we won't be discarded when we are most vulnerable. When that contract is broken, something inside you breaks too. These are not just emotional experiences, they are psychological events. The brain doesn't distinguish well between physical and emotional pain, it processes them in similar regions. That's why your body ached when they left. That's why you couldn't sleep. Why you lost your appetite or clung desperately to hope that they'd come back. This wasn't just sadness, it was trauma. Abandonment introduces a subtle but corrosive narrative into your identity: you are not enough. And that lie, once accepted, begins to metastasize. It shows up in your self-doubt, in your hesitation to trust again, in your fear of opening up even when someone new shows you kindness. That's the hidden cost of being left, the erosion of self-worth. But here is where the injustice deepens, because the person who leaves often moves on easily, at least outwardly. They continue living, sometimes thriving, while you're left cleaning up emotional wreckage they helped create. You watch them post pictures, smile in public, laugh as if nothing happened, and the contrast between their apparent peace and your internal chaos makes the pain sharper. It feels unfair, because it is. And yet, it's precisely in this perceived unfairness that the deeper test of your character emerges. Will you allow their disregard to define you? Will you internalize the message that your pain doesn't matter? Or will you do the harder thing than they never expected and begin the long, deliberate process of rebuilding? Because the truth is, they didn't leave a weak person in tears. They left someone capable of transformation. They left someone with the capacity to suffer and still love again, to be wounded and still believe in healing. And that power, the ability to remain human in a world that tried to make you cold, is where your strength resides. It's easy to romanticize justice as immediate. We want karma to be swift. We want to see the ones who hurt us suffer in the same way we did. But life doesn't work that way. Justice is patient. It unfolds slowly, not for dramatic effect, but because it is thorough. And while you are walking through the fire, learning to breathe through pain, Something in the background was shifting. Quietly, steadily, life was arranging a reckoning not out of vengeance but out of balance. The people who leave others in chaos rarely escape it themselves. What they thought was freedom often becomes their trap. The connections they abandon become the very ones they later seek and can't replace. They begin to feel the cost of what they lost, even if they can't admit it out loud. The guilt doesn't always show itself through tears. Sometimes it shows in restlessness, in shallow relationships, in the inability to find peace, no matter how far they run. And by the time they realize what they've done, it's too late to return, because the person they left behind is no longer the same. You have scars now, not just reminders of pain, but symbols of survival. The injustice of abandonment marked you, yes, but it also refined you. That's the part they never saw coming. They thought they were leaving someone weak. They didn't know they were creating someone resilient. Tears are not weakness, they are the soul's revolt against deception. There's a narrative in this world that says crying is weakness, that to break down is to fall apart. But that's a lie fed by a culture that fears vulnerability. Tears are not surrender. They are protest. They are the soul's uprising when something sacred has been violated. When truth is betrayed, when love is mishandled, when promises are broken, the tears that fall aren't passive. They are active responses to injustice. They are the evidence that something meaningful was touched and damaged. You didn't cry because you were weak. You cried because something inside you was still alive, still real, still honest. And when you watch someone turn their back on everything you gave, your time, your trust, your open heart, those tears came from a place far deeper than emotion. They came from the betrayal of meaning itself. The sadness wasn't just about what was lost. It was about how easily it was discarded. As if everything you poured into the connection was weightless to them, but it wasn't weightless to you. And that's why it hurt. In the moments following betrayal, something primal awakens inside. Your instincts search for reason, for sense in a situation that defies logic. How could someone who once claimed to care now be so indifferent? How could they look at your pain and still walk away as though nothing sacred was shattered? That's the moment when tears become a kind of rebellion, because they show that your soul refused to go numb, that you still value something they have clearly forgotten: emotional truth. People often shame crying because it reminds them of something they've lost: empathy. When you cry openly, you reflect to others what they've buried inside, and it makes them uncomfortable. So they dismiss it. They label it dramatic or weak. But in reality, your tears are a sign that you were connected to something real, something that mattered. That's not weakness. That's strength wearing its rawest form. When someone deceives you not just with lies, but with emotional dishonesty, your inner self knows before your mind can explain it. There's a dissonance. Something feels off. But because you cared, you tried to rationalize it. You made excuses for their behavior. You doubted your intuition. And when the mask finally fell, when their true intentions were revealed, it wasn't just shock that hit you, it was grief. Grief for the version of them you believed in. Grief for the version of the relationship you thought was real. That grief is heavy. It doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it comes as silence, tears in the dark, a chest that tightens without warning. These are not signs that you failed. They are signs that you were honest in a world that plays pretend. You didn't lose control. You held on longer than anyone else would have, hoping something good could still be salvaged. And when it couldn't, your body mourned what your mind struggled to accept. The truth is, you should never be ashamed of your tears. They are sacred. They carry truth no explanation can match. They are how the body tells the world something real was just torn from me. That's not a breakdown. That's the deepest kind of courage. To feel fully, to grieve sincerely, and to refuse to harden just to make others more comfortable. You see, tears are cleansing, not just emotionally, but psychologically. They help you release what your spirit can't carry anymore. That pain that sits in your chest, it needs a way out. And when you cry, you are giving your soul permission to exhale. You are choosing healing over suppression. That is not weak. That is powerful. Because many people carry wounds for years simply because they refused to feel them fully when they were fresh. And let's not forget, tears also mark the beginning of transformation. After the sobbing ends, after the silence settles, there is a moment where you see everything more clearly. You begin to realize who was there for you, and who never truly was. You recognize how deeply you loved and how carelessly they handled it. And that realization is sobering but also liberating because it breaks the illusion. It exposes the truth. And once you see the truth, you cannot return to the lie. So yes, you cried, maybe more than you wanted to, maybe in places you never expected. But those tears carved something strong inside you. They taught you what matters. They reminded you that your love is not disposable, that your presence is not something to be taken lightly. And while they may have left you feeling shattered, they also revealed your depth, something those who hurt you couldn't even comprehend. In time, you will look back on the tears not with shame, but with honor, because they marked the moment your soul stood its ground. They were the rebellion against emotional dishonesty, the refusal to become numb, the resistance to becoming like them. That is your power, not the absence of pain, but the refusal to fake your way through it. So no, your tears weren't weakness. They were your truth in motion, in voice, in form. And one day, when they finally feel the consequences of what they've done, it won't be your tears that haunt them. It will be the fact that you once cried for them and they didn't care. Life has a way of confronting the unrepentant with their reflection. Some people walk away from what they've broken with no visible guilt. They carry on with their lives as if nothing ever happened, as if they weren't the ones who left someone in emotional ruins. To the outside world, it may even look like they've won, that they escaped accountability, that they hurt you and walked off freely, unscathed. But life doesn't work on our timetable. It doesn't always deal out justice immediately. Instead, it waits, patiently, and while it waits, it watches, because life has a strange way of circling back, not with revenge, but with exposure. Sooner or later, every mask falls, and those who hurt others without remorse eventually come face to face with what they've done, not in the form of punishment from the outside, but in the form of consequences from within. The human soul isn't built to betray others without cost. At some level, even if buried beneath denial, distraction, or arrogance, the truth festers. People who leave damage behind and pretend it didn't happen aren't escaping the truth. They're postponing the moment they will finally have to confront it. And the longer it takes, the louder it returns. When you give someone loyalty, consistency, emotional safety, and they take it for granted, they don't realize what they're truly doing. They think they're freeing themselves, chasing some illusion of something better. But what they're really doing is walking away from one of the rarest things in the world, genuine care. At first, they may feel relief. It's easy to feel free when you've just offloaded responsibility. But that freedom is shallow. It's temporary. Because no matter how fast they run or how much they distract themselves, they can't outrun the echo of what they've destroyed. That echo grows over time. At first, it's just a whisper, an uneasy feeling they ignore. Then it becomes a shadow following them into new relationships, into quiet nights, into the moments when the noise fades. Eventually, it becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, they no longer see who they pretended to be. They see what they did. They see the person who loved them, stood by them, believed in them, and they remember walking away. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. This is how life confronts the unrepentant. Not always through loss or failure, but through revelation. The moment they realize that what they walked away from was real, and that they will never get it back, that's when life delivers its quiet verdict. And it's far more painful than any punishment you could wish on them, because regret, when it finally arrives, doesn't ask for permission. It comes when they least expect it, and it doesn't leave quickly. They may try to replace you. They may surround themselves with distractions, with attention, with surface-level connections. But something always feels off. No matter how much they try to duplicate what they had, it doesn't feel the same. Because deep down, they know what they had with you was rare. And they know they left it behind not because it wasn't real, but because they weren't ready to receive it. And here's what's even more profound. While they were busy running from what they did, you were facing your pain. You were processing, healing, growing. You sat with your grief. You questioned everything. You rebuilt your sense of self from the ground up. You did the work they avoided. And that difference, over time, becomes the gap they can never cross again. Life has a built-in balance. It doesn't erase what was done, but it ensures that nothing done in dishonesty remains hidden forever. Eventually, even the ones who seem untouched by guilt begin to feel the weight of their choices. And when that happens, it's not a moment you'll witness. Often it happens in silence, behind closed doors, long after you've moved on. But rest assured, it happens. The beauty in all of this is that you don't need to seek revenge. You don't need to prove your worth to those who couldn't see it. Life does that for you. Your growth becomes your answer, your peace becomes your closure, and the silence they once gave you becomes the noise they now live with. One day they'll look at someone new and feel the absence of what they once had. They'll remember your patience, your loyalty, your depth, and they'll realize far too late that they traded something rare for something easy. That realization, that private collapse, is life's response to their indifference, and it's louder than any words you could have spoken. So let them go on pretending if they must. Let them laugh now, celebrate their decisions, claim victory. Because time is not on the side of the unrepentant. Time reveals. Time reflects. And eventually life shows them exactly what they became, not through punishment, but through truth. And truth, once seen, cannot be unremembered. You became stronger because you refused to stay broken. There is a moment after heartbreak when everything goes quiet, not peaceful quiet, hollow quiet. The kind that sits in your chest like a weight. You wake up and the world feels unfamiliar. You go through the motions, but nothing feels real. That's what it means to be broken, to exist, but not to live. To breathe, but not to feel. And in that state, it's easy to believe that this is where the story ends. But it didn't end there for you. Because even though it would have been easier to stay down, to let the pain define you, to build a home inside your sorrow, you didn't. You stood up, even if you were shaking, even if your voice trembled and your hands were still carrying the weight of everything you'd lost. You didn't stay broken, and that single decision, made in the quiet of your own suffering, changed the course of your life. No one else could see what it took. People don't always understand silent battles. They don't know what it means to cry in your car just to hold it together in front of others. They don't see the nights you stared at the ceiling wondering if you'd ever feel safe again. The strength it took wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was in the small, steady choices: getting out of bed, putting one foot in front of the other, refusing to let the past steal your future. You became stronger not because someone came to rescue you, but because you stopped waiting to be rescued. You realized no one was coming to fix what they broke, and in that realization you discovered something life-changing: you could fix yourself. Not perfectly, not all at once, but piece by piece. And every day you chose healing, you reclaimed a part of yourself that had been buried under betrayal. There's something sacred about the strength that comes from heartbreak. It doesn't make you bitter unless you let it. It makes you precise, disciplined, wiser. You stop giving your energy to people who don't value it. You stop chasing validation from those who treated your presence as optional. You begin to guard your peace not out of fear, but out of reverence for what it cost you to find it again. What they did to you, the abandonment, the lies, the emotional carelessness, it could have defined you. It could have left you jaded and cynical. But instead, it taught you what love is not. It showed you what you will no longer tolerate. And that awareness is power. Because now when someone steps into your life, you can see clearly. You've developed the discernment that only comes from being deeply hurt and choosing to rise anyway. Strength doesn't mean nothing hurts you. It means you're no longer destroyed by the things that once shattered you. It means you carry your scars with honor, not as symbols of weakness, but as proof that you survived something that tried to undo you. And when people see your strength now, they may think it was always there, but you know better. You know it was forged in private, in darkness, in nights filled with unanswered questions and silent tears. And perhaps the most powerful part? You didn't just survive, you grew. You built boundaries where there were none. You found clarity in places that used to confuse you. You began to see your worth not as something granted by others, but as something unshakable. And from that place, you started to live differently, more intentionally, more fiercely, more freely. The irony is, the person who broke you probably never imagined you'd rise this strong. They thought they were writing your ending. They had no idea they were shaping your beginning. They believed leaving you would leave you empty. But what it really did was empty your life of someone who wasn't capable of seeing your value. And in that space, something better was born, not in terms of a new person, but a new self. A self who was no longer begging to be chosen. A self who was no longer apologizing for needing honesty, consistency, or respect. A self who has walked through emotional hell and come out with a deeper capacity for compassion, strength, and truth. That kind of growth can't be bought, and it can't be faked. It has to be lived. You didn't stay broken. And that's what changed everything. Not because the pain disappeared overnight, but because you carried it differently. You learned to hold grief in one hand and hope in the other. You learned to trust your own voice again. And most of all, you learned that strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about walking through it with integrity. So, no, you're not the same person you were before they broke you. You're more. You're wiser. You're clearer. And though it came at a cost, you now know what you're truly made of. They may never see the depth of your strength, but you will. Every single day. And that, in the end, is what makes your story powerful. The ones who cause the pain are often the least equipped to escape its return. There's a hidden truth about people who leave pain behind them like footprints. They often believe they're immune to consequences. They convince themselves that causing damage is a sign of power, that detachment is strength, and that walking away from the mess they made is the same as escaping it. But life, as quiet and patient as it may be, has a flawless memory. And the pain they planted doesn't vanish. It waits and it grows. What they don't understand is this: emotional pain has a way of circling back not as punishment, but as a mirror. Life doesn't send back exactly what they did. It sends back the reflection of it. It allows them to feel one day what they made others feel, not because life is cruel, but because life is just. And those who are emotionally unequipped, those who never learned to sit with discomfort, those who always avoided accountability, they are the least prepared when that mirror finally shows up. When you gave them your heart, your trust, your patience, they may have taken it for granted. They may have believed your presence was guaranteed. So when they broke what you offered, they thought there would be no real cost. They thought you'd recover quietly while they moved on effortlessly. And for a while it might look that way. They seemed untouched. You were the one left picking up the pieces. But appearances are deceptive, and emotional debts always come due. See, people who hurt others and walk away often build a version of themselves that is held together by distraction. New relationships, new highs, constant movement. But they're not really moving forward, they're running. From guilt, from memory, from themselves, and the more they run, the more brittle they become. Because you can only outrun your own soul for so long. At first they might feel untouchable. They might mock your pain, deny their role, rewrite the story in their favor. They tell themselves they did nothing wrong, or that you were too sensitive, or that the end was mutual. These narratives are like armor to them, temporary shields against reality. But time has a habit of stripping away every false layer. And when that armor begins to crack, what's left is something they've never truly faced, their own emptiness. And that's where the pain returns, not through an outside event, but from within. It might come through a new relationship that doesn't feel right no matter how hard they try. It might show up in restless nights, in sudden anxiety, in a hollow sense that something's missing and no one around them can fill it. That's the echo of what they broke. That's the pain returning, shaped not like revenge, but like truth. The tragedy is that many of them were never taught how to face pain. They were taught to avoid it, to mask it, to shift blame. So when the emotional cost arrives, they're not ready. They don't have the tools. And what they once dismissed as your weakness becomes their private downfall. Not in public, not where anyone else sees, but in the solitude where no lies can protect them anymore. You, on the other hand, lived through the storm. You sat with your suffering. You didn't run from the wreckage, you rebuilt from it. That pain you carried became your teacher. It showed you the cracks in your boundaries, the depth of your loyalty, the places in your soul that needed healing. You grew, you changed, you faced yourself, and that growth became your armor, real armor, not denial wrapped in ego. The difference is profound, because now, while they are haunted by the reality they avoided, you are grounded in the truth you accepted. You are not the same person they hurt. You are wiser, more discerning, more rooted. They are the same person who caused pain, only now they're beginning to feel what they once fled. This is the quiet justice of life. Not loud, not theatrical, but real. Sometimes people ask, why don't they suffer like I did? And the answer is they will. But it won't look the same. It will come in the form they are least prepared to deal with. It won't just be about what they lost. It will be about who they became in the process of causing loss. And when that realization hits that they discarded something real for something shallow, the guilt won't just knock. It will live with them. And unlike you, they won't know how to process it because processing requires humility. It requires looking in the mirror without turning away. And those who never learned that discipline, those who made a habit of avoiding inner work, they crumble when the pain finally turns inward. This is why you don't need to wish for their downfall. You don't need to track their life, hope for karma, or wait for their regret. Life has already prepared the mirror, and they will face it when they least expect it, not because you wanted it, but because it was inevitable. So let them think they've moved on. Let them wear the smile, live the illusion. Because one day, in a moment they didn't see coming, they'll feel the cost of what they did, and they won't know how to carry it. That's when the pain returns. And that's when the truth arrives, not to punish, but to confront. And unlike you, they won't be ready.